I can do that. All right. John and I moved to St. Joe in 1970, and when we moved here, we were surprised to learn that there's a lot of Studebaker connections here in St. Joe. Some of you might know this, but some of you might not, so we'll go through some that you know pretty quickly. And you know that the Studebaker brothers started making wagons, and John went to California and made wheelbarrows, and of course the last made by Studebaker was the Avani. And this is a picture of the Studebaker brothers. There's Peter, John Moeller, Henry, Jacob, and Clem. And here's another one of them. And the meaning of labor, omnia vincit, means work conquers all. Henry left the business in 1958 to farm. John Moeller bought out Henry's share with his small fortune of $8,000 he made in California making wheelbarrows during the gold rush era. He was also called Wheelbarrow Johnny. Jacob joined his brothers in full-time in 1975. Peter joined in 1864 as chief salesman, setting up dealerships over the country. This is a picture of Peter. Seems like all of them wore very long beards. This is a sketch from a 1918 book by Albert Erskine entitled History of the Studebaker Corporation. It shows only 2 stories. It was actually built with 3 stories. Here is a picture of it as a 3-story building. St. Joseph, Missouri was the first showroom outside of Indiana. In about 1870, Peter with his brother-in-law John Welch came out here to start it. This is from the Illustrated Guide of St. Joe in 1887, showing another sketch. It's on the corner of 4th and Edmond. This is an 1883 Sanborn fire insurance map that shows where the repository was. There's a white arrow on the left there that shows where the carriage repository was. Studebaker Welch was listed as early as 1868 in the city directory. The 1870 census shows Peter and 3 children living in St. Joseph. Peter left St. Joseph to return to South Bend, Indiana in 1871. A famous anecdote asserts that Peter once said he could sell all the wagons Clem could make, to which Clem replied he could make all the wagons his brother could sell. This is an advertising piece that we found showing the branch houses in Portland, Oregon up on the top left, Salt Lake City on the bottom left, and the showroom in St. Joseph on the upper right, and also the Kansas City branch on the lower right. This is a current photo showing the 3rd floor was removed. Now this is in St. Joseph. In 1949, there was a building permit for fire damage that was taken out. The fire was in 1948. This is another view showing that it wasn't on a corner like I assumed years ago. There's an antique store to the left there. It was called Blocks and now an antique store. This advertising piece I bought in the current antique store. It's called Apex Buffalo Antiques Abbey Laird Rare Books. Jacob died in 1887, Clem died in 1901, giving us the impression this was taken before Jacob died in 1887. When we asked the owner of the antique store about the photo, he said he could tell us he found it in the back room in the rafters where the repository had been, but he actually found it at a garage sale along with the rest of the items in the box. It's not in very good condition, but of course we had to have it. This is the new generation of the Studebaker family with the sons and the sons-in-laws. Here we talk about Nelson Riley, who was the 2nd vice president. He married Mary Studebaker, the daughter of Peter E. Studebaker. Nelson was a native of St. Joseph and was a partner in the Condon Riley Company, which was a cracker company. This is the home that was built on 603 5th Street about 1882. Peter built this for his daughter Mary and Nelson Riley. The home was converted into a hotel by 1894, later into 7 apartments, and now is a private residence. It's been open for several times for tours, but for some reason we seem to be out of town all the time. You might notice the gargoyles, if you can see large enough, up on the top of the roof. There's one there that shows. Now this is from Isidore Street. This is the looking north from Isidore Street, and it's a beautiful building. And I just read recently, somebody lived there years ago and the building had been painted white, which would be a terrible shame to have all this brick turned white. Here's another view of it. This is a carriage house. It's on the east side of the home, which is Isidore Street. And this picture here with our truck that we used to own shows that it was still a brick paved street, which we thought was kind of neat. Mary and Nelson moved back to South Bend, Indiana shortly after 1890. They had 3 sons and a daughter. One of the sons, Nelson Studebaker Riley, was an assistant manager of the vehicle branch in 1909 in Kansas City. He served in the Army and in 1919 joined his brother Frank Studebaker Riley to form the Studebaker Riley Company, which was the headquarters for the distribution of Studebaker cars in Kansas City. This is an obituary for Lillian Bartlett Studebaker that a friend down the street gave us one day because he knew we were into Studebakers. Of course, it was interesting because it said Studebaker, John M. Studebaker. Being the wife of John Moeller Studebaker III, we had to look into it. How did they meet? One from St. Joseph, the other from South Bend. I found the name of a grandson, actually 2 grandsons, but I picked the one named David because we have a son named David. He is the great-great-grandson of John Moeller Studebaker. I wrote him a letter. He was kind enough to send us quite a bit of information along with this photo of Lillian. It also turns out that he is the only grandchild of Lillian out of 8 to own a Studebaker. According to Lillian's grandson David, their meeting took place at Wismo, a summer compound on Lake Court Orioles near Eau Claire, Wisconsin. The name came from the purchaser of land, Dr. Frederick Cronkite. He was the father of Walter Cronkite, who of course was born in St. Joseph also. And Wis from the abbreviation of Wisconsin, and Missouri, the abbreviation from Missouri. Dr. Cronkite purchased a 5 parcel of land, now known as Wismo Point, in 1907. The Bartlett brothers Land and Loan Company held the mortgage on the 5-acre site. It was an angling club, and D.L. Bartlett Jr. was one of the original incorporators. He built the first cabin in 1917. It turns out that I also had worked with one of D.L. Bartlett Jr.'s relatives here in town. Didn't know it at the time, obviously, because we didn't connect the Bartlett brothers with Studebaker. J.M. Studebaker Jr. owned 5 acres in an adjacent parcel, and his son John Moeller Studebaker III used to summer there at the same time as D.L. Bartlett Jr.'s son Jerry and daughter Lillian. Obviously, a romance ensued, followed by marriage. Now, a lot of this next you might already know. STP is a scientifically treated petroleum. Dwight Liggett, Jack Hill, and Robert D. Hart were the people from St. Joseph that were involved in this. Liggett bought the exclusive rights to the German-invented lubricant for $1,500 at an industrial fair in Hanover, Germany in 1954. An interesting side note is that John had met Robert D. Hart at a restaurant that he owned here in St. Joe many years ago. Recently, I have met personally, driving by our house to see where I live, the daughter of Robert D. Hart and her husband. We are going to get some more information from her, and I know that this information will be correct because there's a lot of misinformation around about these things. It was packaged in the backyard garage at the rear of 601 South 9th. This is the building that is there currently. We're assuming that this might be the building. We don't know for sure because there's no pictures of it. They sold it from the trunk of their cars during their business and pleasure trips. As sales increased, they moved the operation to a new plant on South 6th Street. This is the building that is currently there at South 6th Street that we just recently found. It's a brick building, so it could possibly be the same building. A woman wrote Liggett that it cured her baby's diaper rash. He never followed up on the potential market, which I don't think any of us ladies would either. In 1961, Chemical Compound Company sold STP to Studebaker. Studebaker Packard for a reported $10 million, retaining 30% of STP's ownership. This is a salesman's sample that we're assuming was bottled in that garage from the late 50s. According to George Vogel, STP historian, it was found on eBay. You can't read it, but the bottom under STP says Chemical Compounds, St. Joseph, Missouri. The early cans were labeled Magic STP. Chemical Compounds, which it shows on the bottom of the can, Chemical Compounds, Inc., St. Joseph, Missouri. This is an STP ad showing Chemical Compounds, St. Joseph, Missouri, Gesundheit, which means wish good health to a person who has just sneezed. In this case, as good health to your car. In 1961, Studebaker Packard Corporation acquired Chemical Compounds. This particular can says Chemical Compounds, division of Studebaker Packard Corporation. The front of the can still had Magic on it. The plant was moved to South Bend soon after the acquisition. This is also a Magic STP can. It says Chemical Compounds, division of Studebaker Corporation, St. Joseph, Missouri, 1962. These are all cans that we have found in antique stores along the way. Of course, you know, racing great Andy Granatelli was named CEO in 1963. The can is distributed by Studebaker Corporation with a date of 1972 on it. We also found this Auto Blitz, a super concentrated fuel treatment. On the top, it also says German developed, lower oil consumption, less engine wear, et cetera, et cetera. Recently, actually just this last week, we found this Diesel Blitz STP fuel treatment at an antique store, which has on the side of it Chemical Compounds, division of Studebaker, South Bend, Indiana. Of course, we had to collect all these cans, and John had to make a stand because we couldn't find one. The sign up above saying German developed, we did find in an antique store, and it says Chemical Compounds, division of Studebaker, St. Joseph, Missouri, 1962 Studebaker Corporation. This is possibly an ad, it looks like, that was in the Post magazine. Okay. As of April 2015, the parent company was Energizer Holdings, which is after many, many companies selling off to different people. This is a carriage in the Glore Psychiatric Museum. It's a 1908 Studebaker elliptic spring Iser buggy. It was on display for a while. I checked before a program we did earlier this year, and they have it currently in storage with tentative plans to have it on display at the White Tootle Mansion, which is a different museum. We didn't know it was there when we went on a tour, but here is the step that gives us definitely the indication it is Studebaker. The carriage was owned by Donald and Margaret Weston of Audubon, Iowa, and was acquired by the Glore Museum in December 1998. Restoration work was completed by hospital carpenters, painters, and work therapy staff. Horse-drawn transportation was normal for the hospital staff and patients. Early ledgers show that a spring wagon was bought from H.O. Pope Company of St. Joseph for $160 on December 12, 1874. Carriages such as this 1908 Studebaker model were used by George Catlett, the first superintendent, and most of his physicians and staff at the hospital. More Studebaker in St. Joseph is at the Patey House Museum. This is a 1927 Studebaker President limousine that was donated by Joe and Gladys Friedman. Along with the car is a wonderful display of more information on the Studebaker connections in St. Joseph and Patey House itself. It says on here, and the gentleman that does this research for this he says Peter Studebaker boarded at the Patey House in 1871, and he would have the records for that. This is also a bobtailed sleigh that was donated by Lance Davis. It was made by the Studebaker Welch Company in St. Joseph in 1870s. This is also upstairs in the Patey House Museum. So you never know where you're going to find any Studebakers. You just have to go and look. This is at the Remington Nature Center. They have also been kind enough to advertise Studebaker Wagon Works in their displays. They let me go in and take this picture without even paying, which was kind of nice. Here's an ad for Studebaker Riley that appeared in the St. Joseph Gazette Herald in 1892, showing they made fine carriages and buggies, farm and spring wagons, sleighs, harnesses, ropes, whips, and blankets. In 1917, here's a short piece that I found on newspapers.com. He was an old car salesman that he purchased a car sales department of City Garage, St. Joseph. Taking hold the first week in July, he proved himself a record breaker in selling 15 Studebakers, 9 used cars and 2 commercial cars. So he was a good salesperson for Studebaker. Another Studebaker dealer here in town was at 1125 Frederick Avenue, Roubidou Automobile Company. This ad was 1919. This is Kennedy Motors, which was located at 224 South 8th Street. This is an ad from 1923. I know it's hard to read. They are interesting. The ads are always interesting to read, to see the prices of the vehicles and how they advertised them. This is Rayborn Macomb Motor, and this is the same address of 8 South 8th Street. So we're figuring that the Rayborn bought out the Kennedy Motors and stayed in the same building. Let's see, this is the building, that is the side of the building where these were on South 8th Street. This is a current picture. And here's the front of the building. Interstate Auto Company was also on South 8th Street, just a block down, 322 South 8th Street. Here is an older photo that was taken, and we got this from Art Crafts Engraving Company, who was above the other automotive company. They still have their offices there on the 2nd floor, and were very kind to provide this old picture for us. And you can see the Studebaker wheel logo above the door. Now this is a current picture of the same building, which is used for storage of cars. The white arrow on the right shows where the logo would have been. You can just imagine it from the previous picture. Another dealer is Carnes Motor Company, which was on South 9th Street. This is a artist's rendition of what the building was going to look like. We did an interview with a gentleman named Bob and Donna Perry years ago. They were residents of St. Joe and were members of the Kansas City Car Club. She worked in the office. She was secretary, I believe, or treasurer, one of the two, for Carnes Motor Company for a lot of years. Those windows on the side that you see opened up, when you walk down the street, if you had those windows up, the back two people, if they weren't watching where they were going, they would walk into the window. So she was very careful not to have the window open any more than she had to. This is a current picture of that location. So the building is still there. Last we heard, it was used for storage. People would pay to store their vehicles in there. Around the back, there was a driveway, and with the way it is, they could drive up into the 2nd floor. That's the end of that, but here are some pictures of our cars that we have taken, and these were in the program we did previously because people probably wondered why we knew so much or why we thought we knew so much. These are all of our cars, and they have been in turning wheels, which I encourage everybody to send pictures to Ann Turner because she needs pictures, especially this year. There's been so little going on that she really is in need, and she's always interested in any kind of pictures. Doesn't even have to be your car. I took one up in Iowa. There was a truck. It was a day picture and a night picture, and that was when we went up on the tour there the last time. And she was just she just loved that picture. She put it in, and it had no connection to us whatsoever. We didn't know the people. It was just a neat picture. So that's the end of that. Hopefully it wasn't too boring, and I talked fast, so it didn't last very long.
Thank you, Diane. It was not boring. I enjoyed it immensely.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. The STP stuff, I knew Studebaker owned STP, but I didn't know
it started in St. Joe.
I did not know that, and I didn't know it was of German descent.
Yes.